Hurling from the sky is a hero for Etheria. Here's a look at the brand new Mattel Master Universe Origins Rokkon, young heroic comet warrior. Thrown across the universe by the evil Hordak, the Comet Warriors landed on Eternia. The young soldier known as Rokkon and his brethren fought alongside the heroic Master Universe in their battle against evil. Like all rock people, he can fold his humanoid body into a boulder and deflect laser blasts with his rocky exterior. Well, I guess if you're ever upset, at least you have a boulder to cry on. No? This, of course, we get a closer look. Master Universe Origins, Rokkon. You can also call him Rokkon if you want. Rokkon seems like you want it to be like Rock On. But no, I'm going to call him Rokkon. The figure, though, in his non-folded up state, actually is going to stand about 5.5 inches in height, or the leader of the Rockmen is about 14 centimeters tall. Both in the case of Rokkon and the earlier looked at Cyclone. Big thank you to Daryl, who actually hooked me up on both figures. Size-wise, obviously, you're not going to probably want to have the two displayed next to one another. You'll notice right away that Rokkon comes up a little bit short. Seeing as, again, like, funny enough that Hordak seems tied both to Cyclone, as Cyclone was battling him on the back of the packaging, but he also is very directly connected to also Rokkon, so I want to bring him in as well for comparisons. Let's bring in some other random figures. Here's what he looks like along with the Sorceress, and here's what he looks like with Prince Adam. The figure gets packed with two things, one being his blaster that can plug onto the front of his torso, like the original vintage toy. The other one being a mini comic that, at least for right now, is exclusive to Rokkon. Why I say that, though, is maybe down the road, if Mattel has plans to do other rock people, we might see a resurface of the Spear of Eternity. For right now, though, it's a one and we're done. This is the only time we're going to be getting this comic again. The pages are very few. I mean, there's only about 4 pages to flip through. The artwork is really nice on this. And just basically to sum this up, they arrive on the planet, they battle other rock-like people, and the battle is so bright, in fact, it illuminates the sky of Eternia and Etheria. Oh, great. Now I don't even have to read this. Thanks for spoiling it. Sorry. On the back, there's no advertisements at all for any future figures, but again, you never know. We might actually see the Spear of Eternity come back to us with a future release. The figure also comes included with the actual blaster that you would have had in the original toy. Now, like Cyclone, if you saw my review of the Cyclone, thank you for that, by the way, I did pick that one up at a garage sale when I was really, really young. Probably paid like 50 to 75 cents for it. And he didn't come included with his vintage shield. Rokkon was also a figure I picked up, but not funny enough at the exact same garage sale. It was a completely different one. This guy was easily able to find, but not always the case. You could get this guy with actually the little blaster. The blaster, though, has two posts. One is a shorter one, one's a longer one. The shorter of the two, actually, if you look at the figure, there's a hole in the front of his body. You take the shorter post, and it plugs in place, basically just dowel in place. Now, you could keep this in place when it comes to actually folding this guy up and turning him into the boulder. For right now, at least, I'm going to remove it. There is also a longer post that if you just detach this, now really too, you could also have it facing this way as well, but that just looks like he's like E.T. calling home, which I guess isn't that far removed. But if you take the longer post, now what you can actually do is that you can use it as an actual handgun. And like I said, it just fits inside his hand like that. I like the idea that they actually gave us two different purposes for something that would have, I think, only had a single purpose back in the day. Now, the only thing I would say about this is, whether you have it on the front of his body or you decide to put it in his hand, either way, though, I find the little satellite disc that he has on the front of it spins way too loosely. I mean, whether that's the case on the original vintage toy, my original toy didn't have this one. But again, like I feel like it should be a little bit tighter. I don't think it should spin as fast as it does. Anyways, we'll just kind of detach it for right now, put it off to the side. The gimmick of this guy, obviously, is the fact he does compact. You basically would take the whole front half of him and the back half and just fold it in on himself. It basically becomes a boulder. The thing I've seen certainly online is complaints about the character being, because, of course, he's heavily now articulated. The original Rokkon basically would have just had hinges in arms, hinges in his legs, and basically from there you're just folding it up. Would have made for a much easier, more seamless-looking body. The complaints I certainly have seen, I could back behind, because, of course, when you do fold this guy up, there's going to leave now a lot more visible gaps. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. First, though, for the features, let's look at his face. The nicely way they've painted the silver there on the front of his face looks again like the original vintage toy. I like the way they've used the orange on the inside, which I would imagine is probably painted, because I would guess that this has all been cast in probably blue plastic. They would have painted the back of the figure's body in the silver, so that this probably is all painted in yellow. And then you got the little side areas there also in his rib cage, also nicely painted there, both in dark burgundy, and then he's got some nice little silver accents there as well. He seems a little squat. I mean, obviously, we've already seen the comparisons of other figures, so he's a little bit shorter than other figures. But from what I remember, at least the original 80s version of Rokkon also had a pretty small statured size. Of course, this guy now does benefit from the new Master Universe Origins articulation. So, of course, what he wouldn't have had before, he has now. He has like hinges in arms, hinges in his legs and in his elbows, and hinges in his legs down below here. Where he would have had basically just a shell of a body on all the parts of his limbs. He at least now benefits because he has the additional articulation that if you want to break the mold up a little bit, you basically can still rotate the arm. So now it's going to look more like he's kind of got these arm shields. I kind of like the look of that. I know, obviously, if I'm just not planning to display this guy always in a rock, my plan down the road is eventually find myself another Rokkon. They're pretty easy and pretty cheap to find now. You probably could easily find them for like, I don't know, $15 to $20 maybe online. I probably will end up getting one, I think, and having that displayed, I think, in like the boulder shape or in the rock face, and then have the other one display, the more articulated version of Rokkon displayed along next to him. I guess we could look at the articulation on this guy, seeing as really, we're going to fold him up into a ball in a second. So it's just, we'll bring his arms around here. So again, looking at the head sculpt, it's going to be on a ball joint, but it's the most awkwardest of ball joints, just because the way the head is designed and because so much of it has to overlap the back of his body means that when you are rotating it, it always feels like you're turning it, but then it forces the head down. I mean, it looks down only by that far. It looks up. You can also move it back and forth slightly. But to go into this guy expecting the same level of articulation as other Master Universe Origins figures, you might be a little bit disappointed. He has the waist swivel, which is still good to see. I mean, the arms basically work the exact same way as other Origins figures, so those hinge outward. You can take the arms and rotate them all the way around. He also has the hinge now in the elbow, which wasn't ever the case with the original vintage toy, and this also does rotate back and forth. He does also have, which I was really surprised to see, a swivel in his hand. I don't know why I was so surprised. I kind of just assumed that this hand was going to be molded to his form, but that, I guess, it wouldn't really have made much sense. You could really technically also detach this guy if you wanted to mix and match the parts. It was really one of those weird selling things that Master Universe Origins claimed, was the fact that you could just change the parts, take the arms off. Again, if you want to mix and match them, if you want to just like take the arm off, you could swap it out with like, okay, now that I've started this journey, I will show you. Taking like the arm off of like, Prince Adam, you can attach the arm basically. I mean, this is a horrible example, just because like Prince Adam's got basically now this tunic piece over top of it, but basically you'd be able to swap this out if you want to give He-Man like rock arms instead. I don't know why you would ever really want to have He-Man with rock arms, but you could do that. You could do that if you want to. Popping that back in place. He does, again, have the waist swivel. The legs hinge out there on ball joints still. You can bring the legs forward and back. I mean, obviously, the original toy would have been able to really do that as well, but more so just for the gimmick of being able to fold the toy up. He has a hinge here in his knee. That also rotates. There's also rotation here in the lower boots, and there's ankle articulation back and forth there as well. The only thing I would really say from like a humanoid standpoint is that he has a hard time to stand. I find I kind of have to always kind of put him down and then just arch him back a little bit to kind of get that sweet spot. Either I have him too far back and the figure topples backwards. If I have him too far forward, then the figure basically topples forward. But that's basically how the figure looks if you want to have him in his humanoid state. Now, again, if you want to fold this guy up, the original toy would have basically just had like, it would have had a hinge joint here, hinge, 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 and hinge. And basically with all those 5, you just basically fold it up on itself. Here you have to kind of be a little bit more selective with what you're doing. I mean, obviously if you're having the arm out like this, you want to make sure everything is sort of straight, that you're lining up the shapes and making sure, again, like it looks somewhat seamless. So we're going to take the head and we're going to bring that down. Now the head is on a ratcheted joint. So you can see like there's little ratcheted joint sections there. When you bring it down, you can kind of feel that it snaps. Not the kind of snapping not the bad snapping, the good snapping. Then you're going to also want to bring the arms in. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about here. Nothing really does kind of attach, together. I mean, if you're obviously going to be bringing the arms in, you're going to see like there's a gap space right there. There's really no way that I can see that you can really fix that. There's no places, for example, that this is going to peg in place. I guess if they had put like little notches here where it would have lined up and fit inside of a groove, those notches, those little tab points would probably just ultimately break. But again, you're basically just going to fold the front forward, and then you're going to take the legs and bring them inward as well. And then you're just going to want to, of course, swivel the legs around and basically fold it in as best as you can get it. You're never really going to get it to a point where it looks like it's as seamless as the original 80s toy. That's about as good as you're going to really be able to get. With, again, like now having hinges in his shoulders where he never had it before. We're having hinge joints now in the back of his legs where he never really had it before. He never really does get that look like he had with the original toy. I mean, it's pretty close, but again, like I don't know if it's fooling anybody. Certainly, maybe it might fool Hordak and his men, because Hordak's kind of dumb. But like, if any person walking by would know that's basically just a guy leaning down, basically kneeling down on the ground and just folding himself inward. I mean, it looks the part at least of giving us a somewhat believable looking rock. But I gotta admit, like the 80s toy did a little bit better. While I'm also folding this guy back out, there's one thing I also really want to talk about, and that's the packaging. The packaging that this guy does also come included with. Let's just put him right over here for a second. The packaging is quite collector friendly in the sense that if you bring them in here, you'll see that it actually just sits inside like a little canal. See the little plastic there on the sides, little flaps that allows you, at least if you want to have this guy display on the shelf, and if down the road you decide you want to change things up, you basically can just open this back up, put the tray, I'm going to keep the tray, put that back inside, of course, with Rokkon inside, and then you just can close that back up and have it nicely presented on the shelf. You know, hang it on the wall. Nice artwork, by the way, there on feature on the front there for Rokkon, and again, some really nice artwork featured on the back. I can't remember the character's name. It's going to come back to me in a second. And of course, there's a leech on the back. So again, all of this, like Cyclone, very heavily attached to Hordak. Nice looking figure. I mean, knowing to go into this, I knew kind of exactly what I was going to be getting. I mean, it's not a figure that, you know, just to bring back in Cyclone. Cyclone, I kind of already knew what exactly I was getting into. It basically is just kind of like the Cyclone we got from the 80s, just from additional articulation. Rokkon also is pretty much the exact same idea. He has a gimmick, but I don't think it's a gimmick that works as well as Cyclone. Yes, he folds in. Yes, he does have sort of the rock outer facing to him. But the problem with it, though, is by having the additional articulation for like his arms, basically all his limbs, it means that when you are folding him up eventually, you're going to know some very visible gaps. If that doesn't bother you at all, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm just glad the fact that we finally get ourselves a new articulated version of Rokkon. If you're not bothered by that, it's a nice update to what we got with the original Rock people back in the 80s. Somewhat really ironic to get your hands on the original vintage Rokkon would actually be cheaper than trying to buy now a 2024 Origins version of him. Now, usually it's the other way around. If you were to get yourself a pretty good condition He-Man or a Skeletor, expect to pay anywhere from $70 to $120 depending on how many accessories and how much wear and tear goes along with the figure. But like with the earlier looked at Cyclone, for example, both him and Rokkon, a dime a dozen. You could find these easily at flea markets. You could find them at garage sales. You know, obviously there's a degree of wear and tear to these. Rokkons were notorious for having overly loose legs. Because you got to think about it. Depending on how many times the kids would fold them up into a ball, the one that I have, I remember, I couldn't stand on his own. I'd have to, a lot of times, just lean him up against the wall, because if I tried to stand him, half the time he would just collapse in on himself, because that kid that had owned it before me was probably just doing it on a regular basis. I don't have that worry as much now with this version of Rokkon, but of course this guy's going to be a little bit more expensive if you're trying to track one down. The benefit of him is that he looks like the original vintage toy. He has also now the benefit of additional articulation that wasn't present on the original 80s Rokkon, but along with that goes the sacrifice of having more of the seamless body. What I might just end up doing, instead of paying the stupid price of buying this guy again, I might find myself paying the, I don't know, $10 to $15, $20 at the most to get a Rokkon online. Even if the seller's listing it as, you know, overall good condition, but the figure has overly loose legs. I'll be the first person that says, hey, this guy's still available. But you know he has really loose legs, right? Doesn't matter. I'm only just going to be buying that Rokkon anyways to display him in a ball all the time so I can have the better, more articulated version of him displayed along with it. What do you guys think of Rokkon? Let me know down below in the comments section. Did you guys get the chance to get your hands on the newer version of Rokkon? And do you have the original one? I do hope that this isn't the only time that we're going to see a rock person, courtesy of the folks over at Mattel, that we are going to be getting some future figures of the same size and same configuration. Let's hope that this is the case. This isn't the last time we're going to be seeing the rock people. If you guys did, in the meantime, enjoy this video, want to hit it with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and want to stick around for more Master Universe figures, courtesy of the folks over at, well, courtesy of Daryl. Daryl really did hook me up nicely. Not only with Cyclone that we had a look at in the previous review, Rokkon that we looked at in this review, and one other figure that he was also nice enough to hook me up with. His review will also be coming around right around the corner. Making sure that you're not missing out on any of the things I just finished saying. First of all, again, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure as well you're turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.